when you take the prevention approach, you look for early warning signals that don't really say this is going to be genocide. It says something bad is going to happen if you keep on this slippery slope that you're on in a particular country or region, that something terrible is going to happen, whether it's going to be intrastate war or interstate war or periodic mass atrocities of one kind or another or genocide isn't clear. And if you don't like mass slaughter, well, fine, prevent. The earlier the stage, the better. But it is true, and a very important point that has been neglected and indeed denied is that you always have warning time. A very common thing the political leaders have said in the last 10, 20, 30 years with signs of genocide is that, well, you never can tell till the last minute, and then it's too late to do anything. The only thing you could do at that point would be some massive military intervention. Nobody wants to do that or can do it. It simply isn't true, not in the least. The warning signs are always measured in years and usually in decades. And I mean by that really bad stuff, like periodic outbreaks of mass violence, periodic massacres, first small, then medium, then large, and then, oh my God, the ultimate, over a period typically of decades. That was true with the Armenian genocide, which I document in the book. It was true with the Holocaust. It was true with Rwanda. I saw some of the precursors to Rwanda myself in 1972 when we were doing our work in Africa, because we were very near Rwanda in our research on chimpanzees. In any case, so there is warning time. That's not the issue. The issue is that nobody has known what to do. Leaders don't want to be caught in a situation where they have no knowledge of what to do, cannot be effective, and no constituency for prevention. So they're kind of paralyzed, and therefore they say, in effect, to their legal people, tell me it's not genocide. And they do. Their legal people accommodate and say, well, it's very difficult because the definition of genocide is not precise. It's not precise. And so you can always have a way out. It's terrible, but it's not genocide, or it's not sure it's genocide. Doesn't matter. You want to prevent the terrible thing that's coming down the pike. And the reason for having these centers, well, that's not the only issue, but having these centers is to have together what the world knows and what skills exist and what best practices exist for prevention of mass violence in its various forms, so that it can stimulate many agencies of the UN throughout the world, many agencies and elements of the European Union, which actually reaches far beyond Europe, and the democracies of the world. I say democracies because you don't expect any help from dictators. They're the ones who typically conduct the genocides or other mass violence. But it's catching on. There was a report generated primarily by the United States Institute of Peace to the new administration just a few months ago, saying you should set up what amounts to a center on prevention of genocide in the State Department, perhaps an interagency unit, State Defense, whatever, NSC. Anyway, the United States government should have what it's never had before, some centralized unit with the knowledge. Not that the U.S. would do it all by any means. It says quite clearly we have to have international partners, but we should at least have the knowledge. And it does involve, as you say, my pillars of prevention. Some are very early preventive diplomacy, even pre-preventive diplomacy, but there isn't time to go into that. Like what Kofi Annan did in Kenya earlier this year, when there is an outbreak, but before it's catastrophe, a massive civil war followed by a genocide, which might well have happened in Kenya, there is an intervention. So preventive diplomacy is now growing rapidly, I think in considerable part as the stimulus of the Carnegie Commission and subsequent activities, training for preventive diplomacy at middle and high levels in the UN and in the EU and the African Union and elsewhere. That leads naturally to working toward democratic governance, building democratic understandings and attitudes and institutions for the longer term, and the concomitant with that, building economic development. But it's not really accurate anymore to say economic development. You must say equitable. Socioeconomic development, because if you don't say that, you get these terrible disparities in wealth and deep animosity, and development doesn't do you much good if it's blown away in an outbreak of violence. So concomitant with the fostering of democracy comes the fostering of equitable socioeconomic development, for girls and boys alike, men and women alike, and really with the human development, human security approach to it, not simply foster economic growth. And then there is education for survival, badly neglected. In other words, education for conflict resolution, for violence prevention, for mutual accommodation. To some degree in the democracies we take that for granted, but we shouldn't. We need to teach it. It needs to be explicit understanding about how it is we can achieve education for mutual accommodation, which amounts to, in the world as it is today, education for survival in this century.